Welcome, everyone. So we're just going to run the meeting the same way that we have in the past, where if you'd like to speak, just indicate by raising your hand. You'll see you have the option to do that on your screen. So just feel free to do that or unmute yourself if you have a question, and we'll put you in speaking order. So we're going to start with speak out. So if anyone wants to participate, please indicate by raising your hand, either on video or just letting me know. I want to start by saying a big thank you to Carol and Liam and Auden and everyone else who helped on organizing the all wards mayoral debate and ballot forum, along with the translation portion of that. I know it was a lot of work and it was not an easy process at all. I think Liam, Carol, and I are best friends now based on the amount of time we spent on Zoom together. But I'm really excited with how it came out and very grateful for their help and support with that. But now, if anyone else, I see Dave has his hand raised, so feel free to go.
Great, thank you, and evening, everyone. I had two announcements I wanted to make. The first was, you may recall there's a safety study going on regarding Colchester Ave, and this is starting to wind down towards its final phase. The study team and the advisory committee will be getting together on Thursday, the 18th, to go over the options. And I think at this meeting, we're trying to reach consensus about what are the best options for the Colchester Ave corridor. You may recall that things like raised and separated bike lanes are part of the options. There's also a look at how much parking to retain or not, particularly in the section between East Ave and Greenmount Cemetery. And there's also proposals about what to do regarding East Ave and Colchester Ave intersection. So all those things will be discussed. If you're at all interested in it, there's some great information on the website at the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, Colchester Ave Safety Study. I'm also happy to speak with anybody about that may be interested in learning more about this. And so that I should be able to, I'm the rep for the Ward 1 NPA for this committee. So I should be able to give a report back to the committee at the March NPA meeting. And the second announcement I wanted to make was that we've also been working with a group of the Old East End neighbors, and we've been organizing ourselves to try to spruce up Szymanska Park a little bit. We have a really kind of a celebration called Winterlude that we wanted to put together. We had to scale back a little bit because of COVID. A lot of our in-person events had to be canceled. But if you're interested, there are some things to check out. We've done an incredible job of illuminating the barn and the surrounding area there. So if you want to see a nice lit up park, the lights turn on about 5:15 in the evening and they stay on until about midnight. There's also a story walk there. So it's great for kids or really if anybody, any age. It goes for about a quarter of a mile and it depicts a story that you can read as you walk along through the park. And we've also put together a woods trail, a new woods trail that connects Szymanska Park to Greenmount Cemetery. And there's some historic markers along there and also some other markers about that. So if you want to take a snowy walk through the woods, it's a great spot to do it. So some interesting things to check out there. So those are my two announcements.
Great, thank you. And for anyone just joining us, we're currently doing speak out, so please just indicate with a hand raise if you'd like to make a comment. I believe Liam, you have your hand raised, and then Karen.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make it clear in terms of how this meeting is going. I've been saying this at all the NPAs over the past couple weeks. After the speak out, I'm going to move everyone who's not a panelist or just a presenter and a steering committee member to the attendees list in the interest of security. You can still raise your hand for Q&A sections when we have them, and I can let you unmute and all that stuff. But just for how we're presenting it now is sort of in that style. So I know it's not everybody's favorite way to have virtual meetings, but that is the place that we're moving to at the moment. If anybody has any question about that, you can also ask me.
Great, thank you, Liam. And now Karen.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I was at the 4-7 meeting when they got bombed. And it was interesting because you'd think it would be easier than like throwing someone out of a room that's, you know, maybe inappropriate, but it took a while for them to figure out what to do. And it was, you know, it was first time I've ever seen anything like that. It was interesting. But anyway, I just wanted to say, and, you know, people have heard me say this forever, that my concern for some of our housing, I mean, I did some leafleting lately for Max, and I was in the New North End and where it's mostly owner occupied. And there's such a difference in a neighborhood there. And then I also leafleted in my neighborhood in Ward 1. And it's just astounding at some of the condition of some of our houses. And there's a particular place on Pearl Street that has no or missing many storms. And one window was open. I even sent to Zoraya and Jack. There's like maybe 2 inches open with like a rag or something stuck in the bottom. The front vestibule doors don't shut because I tried to put stuff in there. But anyway, I talked to the people that live there and they said, yeah, it's pretty bad inside, but it's an apartment, they said. It's been broken up into apartments. So I came home, I checked. It has not been inspected since 2017. The COC expired in 2019. I don't know. I'm just really concerned about that. So last night at the forum, someone talked about the similar problem, and they said about zero tolerance for slumlords. And I love that idea. Like, why do we allow this to go on with some of these rental apartments? I mean, they're housing. It's not fair to the people. It's not fair to the neighborhoods. It's just strip mining our houses. So I love that idea of zero tolerance. So maybe that's something you guys are doing lots of good things. You're young and energetic. Our city councilors working their tails off with late meetings, but it just is something that I can't understand why we have put up with that for all these years. So anyway, thank you.
Does anyone else want to participate and speak out? Last call for, okay, Jonathan, yes.
Thanks. I just want to gang on what Karen said. Karen told me about this property, and I went and did a very quick look at the rental database that's on the property database page, and certificates of compliance can be given out as 1 year through 5 year COCs. And just looking at the 1, 2, and 3 years, where you'd say there's got to be something wrong. You know, the 4s and 5s, you might say, yeah, things are great. But the 1s, 2s, and 3s, there's something wrong. Fully 1/4 of those properties are out of inspection. They haven't been inspected in their time. They're out of date. So that means they're effectively 3, 4, and 5 kind of. You know, they've been moved. Because of resources, presumably, the city has moved those properties to better quality properties because they're not inspecting them. So it does really, I'm just agreeing with Karen. That's all.
Thank you. And then Tom, and followed by Carol.
Yeah, along the same lines, do we still have a limit on how many cars someone can park in their front yard? I take it we don't.
Well, I'll answer because I've been crazy about this also. We all have lot coverage. There are lot coverage limits, and you are not supposed to turn green space to a parking space. And really, front yard parking isn't allowed in our zoning at all. Like if you look at the regulations, front yard parking is just not allowed.
I'm on Spear Street often, and number 74, which I think is still in Burlington, has got usually 5, 6, 7 cars. And it's pretty clear that they waited for the grass to freeze so that they could park on the lawn. There's one car that parks right adjacent to the asphalt. And they're not alone in that stretch, basically to the, I guess it'd be the east of Spear Street opposite the UVM campus. There's a number of houses. One, I think, had as many as 7 cars in front of it. And do we have a limit as to how many people can live in a single rental?
4 unrelated adults.
Well, it could be one guy that
I mean,
has
it's just a
7
code violation.
cars, but it seems unlikely.
Okay.
I mean, the shame is
Okay.
we're talking about the lake getting ruined. So that's why lot coverage matters, because all the runoff goes down to the water.
Yep.
So
Okay.
call poor Bill. Thanks.
Thanks.
And now Carol, you're on mute.
I would point out that Bill Ward is presenting tonight, but I don't think we want to dump on poor Bill tonight, but I think we certainly could flag. I think this has probably been a long time coming, that we would love to have Bill and whoever else could come and listen to some of our concerns and inform some of us about what those ordinances are and about enforcement of those ordinances and what we can do as an NPA or citizens of Burlington. So maybe we put Bill, if enough of us are really concerned and want more information, we certainly could put Bill on a future agenda and have it be, a give and take to be able to have that conversation with the city inspector.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll just say a comment. I think I would feel more comfortable if we didn't call out specific address numbers when we're talking, just because when we're talking about housing, because this is being recorded and uploaded to YouTube and we don't know people's situations. And I feel like that could be kind of uncomfortable for someone who isn't even attending the meeting to be talking about their house in terms of that. Maybe people feel differently, but I just feel like that could be a big security thing. And then I see final hand as Jim.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to say, I guess, and I use it all the time, see, click, fix, a lot of these things. And I know some people use them and they may not get results. I've had 100% success with it all the time. And I don't think it's because of who I am being on the DPW commission, but I really do get some great results from that. So when you see people parking on the lawn, when you see storm windows open like that, throw it in there, you get a response right back, and they tell you who they're slotting it to. So at least you know who to check up on if it doesn't get done. And if you do enough of these, you start getting shared other people's, hey, this might be concerning to you, and you can look into it and vote. I think we should use that tool because they're using it extensively. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Now we will move into city council updates and Q&A. So whoever wants to go first, and then just feel free to continue on, and then we can leave questions for the end.
I'm happy to open it up. So yeah, hi everybody. Hope everyone's doing fine and hanging in there. So as of today, mail-in ballots have been mailed out, or they're starting to do so. So that's exciting. And that's just kind of like a general reminder of you have between now and March 2nd to vote. And if you are a procrastinator, try to vote before, or at least mail it back in before the 30th, just to make sure it's counted. Just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of that. And that's for everyone who's a registered voter in Burlington. I'm going to hit on just a few things, and then Jack and Zoraya will hit on the rest. But I wanted to remind folks about the charter change items that are going to be on the ballot. So we have ranked choice voting, which we talked about last time. That's going to be for city council elections only. So that's going to voters, whether we want to adopt that. just cause of for evictions. So establishing, so there has to be just cause, and instead of the current system, which is no cause, which we also talked about, adding a Winooski member to the Airport Commission, and a regulation of thermal energy in buildings to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So those are the 4 ballot for charter change items on the ballot that you'll see shortly. If you're getting your ballot, go into your mailbox. And then another quick little exciting thing is Amtrak service between Burlington and New York City is slated to begin later this year, potentially early next year. This year could be crazy, we don't know, but that's exciting. So yeah, I just want people to be just as excited about that. And yeah, I think that's kind of like around the fringe of updates of the last month, and I'll hand it over to someone else.
I can jump in, or do you want to go, Zoraya? Cool. I realized there was kind of a theme in a lot of the items that I was thinking of talking to. They kind of all have to do with buildings in a way. So there's the charter change around thermal energy in buildings, which we'll talk more about later tonight. We also had a big breakthrough on district energy, which is trying to capture the waste heat from the McNeil biomass plant and use that for heating buildings in Burlington. This has been talked about literally since McNeil was built. McNeil was built with this in mind, but we've never followed through and made it happen. But it's actually, it's reached a level in the process that it has never reached before. It's the closest to actually becoming reality that it's ever been. We talked about it on Monday, but it's moving into this phase 3, and basically there's a partnership between Evergreen, what do they call it? Evergreen Energy, they're a nonprofit, Vermont Gas, the medical center, the city. So basically the medical center would be the main off-taker of the waste steam. So I'm happy to talk more about that if there's questions, but that's a really exciting development. Rental weatherization is something I've been working on since I was elected 2 years ago. And that's also getting very close to the finish line. We're discussing it in ordinance committee. We've been at it for a while. I do think we're getting really close at this point. You know, we've had the draft ordinance in front of us for a couple meetings now, and I think we're almost there in terms of getting that back to the council for a final vote. And I think this rental weatherization addresses one of the biggest sources of issues that we have in our rental housing. A lot of them can be addressed through rental weatherization in terms of these buildings not being very livable and not being up to certain standards. This is a really promising way to get at that issue. And then there's another item that I think often gets sort of confused with the thermal energy charter change, which is an ordinance that we're working on around new buildings. And the concept with this is that for new construction, the primary heating source would have to be renewable. So this would be a requirement for new construction. And a couple other building related things, I guess the city place development, there's a new development agreement, a draft development agreement that the council is going to be voting on Monday. We just got to take a look at it at our last meeting. The administration's been working on it with the partnership that's trying to bring this new concept forward. And I think, you know, I wrote a brief summary in Front Porch Forum on it, but basically the streets would immediately, streets, sidewalks, green space, that would immediately get transferred to the city at no cost under this agreement. And then there would be milestones that the developer would have to meet by certain dates in order to maintain TIF financing. So it's definitely stronger than the previous development agreement, which obviously didn't get us where we needed to be, but this one does seem, I think, more promising. And then finally, also sort of building related is the council advanced to ordinance committee responsible contractor ordinance draft, which is for any city, city contracts on new project or on projects, construction projects. The contractors would have to meet certain standards of being a responsible employer, not only in terms of wages, but also in terms of, classification and just really complying with the law, because we've heard reports that many find loopholes or don't pay or otherwise treat their employees fairly on these projects. And we don't want to be spending, public money on that sort of thing. So this would be a much stronger standard. It's based off of what Montpelier did recently. So bit of a whirlwind on a bunch of building related things. And then I can speak more to other stuff during the candidate forum.
Great, that means I'm next. And to speak to a few of the things, I've been really hoping to have a way to have complaints and see Click Fix talk more to the certificate of compliance process, and that, if folks are talking about the same building, that starts to reduce the number of years that it has. I think right now, Bill doesn't think that's a viable option. I think especially because of what Jonathan said in terms of it, I think they're behind anyway on just the things that they're supposed to do. So I don't think they think adding to the list is a thing, but I think it's a great idea to kind of have a work session in terms of what to do. It's definitely housing is the issue I was most excited about running on. And I think figuring out what we do, especially in our ward or in our district, would be really helpful. And I just also want to say thank you, because I feel like so many people in our ward are kind of, as citizens, doing the work of trying to keep our housing stock together and keeping our sidewalks. And so I think I want to see that and call that out and just say a huge thank you for the folks who are doing that work just on their free time. And the second thing I'm going to speak to is the police vote on Monday. Jonathan had sent me a question that I felt like I wanted to address to the whole NPA and also just give some transparency to what happened. And I won't speak on it so long, but I'm happy to go into more of the details if folks want. And the basics of it is that the mayor and the administration, along with the Burlington Police Department, had put forward a proposal for a kind of interim plan until the assessments are done to increase the police cap again, and to also have a few other positions, including moving community service officers from 2 positions to 6, with the opportunity to go up to 12 total, I think, maybe 10 total. And then on CSLs to have 1 in the Burlington Police Department and 2 yet to be determined. And that was already at least the start of a conversation. I meet with the mayor every Friday to have conversations with him and the director of police transformation and the racial equity inclusion director and Mark Hughes, who of course is part of our NPA and also an activist in the community. And so we have these kind of conversations every week. And so there were differing opinions on the council as to what would happen. The majority of the council, which was along party lines, kind of felt that the cap should stay where it is for now. Some others on the council, some Democrats thought that it should go up, but not to 84. And then a few thought it should go up to 84 or more. So there was quite a degree of variability kind of on where we were on that. I think there was kind of this middle ground where some folks were like, oh, like me, for example, I didn't think that we should raise the cap, but I was willing to raise the cap in order to get some other assurances. And there were different things in terms of what folks wanted for assurances. So one of the things that Jonathan had asked us to push for and that Jack pushed for pretty hard was to make sure that we don't lose some of those valued positions like the DVPO, the Domestic Violence Prevention Officer, or I am a big fan of Lacey Ann Smith's position, which is the community support or community, I don't remember what her exact job title is, but she's the only one in the police department. And so there's been a little bit of a, every time we talk about police changes, I think the police, there's often the threat that those positions will be lost first, which of course, for those of us that really value those positions is kind of the opposite of what we want. And so there'd been a compromise, which was kind of led by myself and Karen Paul to try to raise the cap, but to try to get assurances that some of those positions would be protected, as well as for me to have some of the police budget redirected towards community service liaisons. So folks who would do more to address mental health, basically to be more proactive. So if there are 10 calls to the same location, that somebody, rather than responding to the 10th call, the next day follows up with that person and says, what's really going on? How can we help you? What services do you need? Here's the services that we know we have access to. So just doing some of that more proactive care, whether it's, suicide calls or neighbor conflicts or any of that. And one of the reasons too is I've been on the school resource officer task force for the past few months, and there's definitely been, as we're talking about potentially getting rid of the school resource officers, there's been a lot of talk about a need to have more, to have basically somebody else who is kind of an after school resource for youth in need. And so I was really wanted to get some of those community service positions. Compromise fell through. The mayor didn't like my proposition. So then I worked with Karen Paul. And she really liked it, and Sarah Carpenter really liked it, but ultimately we just didn't have the votes to make it work. And so I don't think, and then there were some attempts at compromise made very late into the night, but it wasn't, I think, really a viable time to suddenly switch to trying to figure out what to do. So we moved forward with approving the community service officers and 3 community service liaisons, 1 in BPD, 1 to be determined. And I don't think it's the end of the conversation. I think at least there seemed like there was some room for finding ways for those folks who feel uncomfortable with the number of police officers that we have now, to still go that way. But for those of us that are like, we have to start being serious about funding alternatives and finding a way to do that, to also have a way forward on that. So I'm happy, sorry, that was maybe a little bit longer than my update should have been, but I know that was a complicated issue that a lot of people have been paying attention to. So I wanted to give a little bit more of the background on that.
Hannah, do you mind if I just follow up briefly?
No, please.
No, that's fine.
So one thing before I forget, with the ballots, so yeah, it's universal mail-in ballots. The city clerk's office, they are requesting that everyone send them back by the 20th, actually. And it's pretty hard work on their end to make this happen, but it's a really tremendous benefit, I think, for our community to have this universal mail-in. But I really would encourage folks, it's really important for them to be able to count all the votes properly, that you do send it back by the 20th. So it's a tight turnaround. It's about 6 days. And the other thing, I just wanted to follow up on the policing and public safety. And obviously it's, extremely intertwined with racial justice. And I think this is one of the hardest issues to talk about. It's super emotionally charged for all of us on all sides when we talk about these core issues of safety and just feeling security or not, and who's safe and who isn't, and who feels comfortable in our community. And I want to give a huge shout out to Zoraya for just leaning in so heavily on this work. It's really, really difficult. We may not all agree on it. You might not agree with Zoraya, but she has leaned in so deeply into this work and has been an incredible leader trying to forge a path forward for the city. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for the counselors? You can indicate, but okay, Karen has their hand raised.
Yes, am I good? I agree. I mean, I'm excited about, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. I'm excited about this transformation that you're doing, because I think proactive is just so important. And I think the giving support to people so that they can get out of those dangerous situations is just so, I mean, it's just the way we need to go. And we personally know, unfortunately, of a family that had to wait to call the police when it's a terrible story, but unfortunately the police have to take a little bit of time to get there, and it was too late. 3 people were killed. And so, I mean, it's a horrible thing in our society that these things happen, but if we have the resources and the public safety net for people, you know, like proactively, I just think it's so great. And I'm really appreciative of what you guys are doing. I know that you're getting a lot of bad things are being said about it, and it will take some time to work it out, but I think it's really the right direction. So thank you. I think it's really good.
Carol, you can go.
Yeah, I just would echo Karen's support and Jack's. I think it's troubling for me to read in Digger about how pointed the conversation got. And it just, Zoraya, you have just worked so hard and listened and collaborated and tried to reach consensus on what, as Jack is characterizing it, is such an emotional and tough issue. And to have it all be the focal point on you just feels really bad. And I know it feels miserable for you. And I just, whatever we can do to give you support, you know, I know someone spoke in the Front Porch Forum, and, you know, just to have us all recognize how much you've brought, you know, with your bright mind and your really persevering heart. And I guess beyond my tears, I guess what I'd like us to do as an NPA is to have it not, if it is conversations, if it is sharing our experiences, if it is listening to one another. I mean, I learned a lot this summer by just listening to the call-ins to the city council meetings, learned a lot about what people's experiences had been. You know, as an older white woman, those are not my experiences. And it was just so helpful to hear that information. And you all heard it night after night, and I think are responding to that. And many of us did not hear it night after night. And it's not been part of our personal experience. And I feel like the NPAs are a place, as well as, you know, local community organizations, churches, or whatever, as a way to disseminate information or bring more of us together to talk about what public safety means. I mean, for me, public safety is, you know, I call the cops when it's too noisy in Szymanska Park. But is that really who I should be calling? You know, is that really how I should be responding to needs in our community? I just think there's so many basic things that we need to talk about, that of what we're asking our police force to do, or what we're asking our community outreach people to do. What can we do as citizens? And I just think NPAs and other organizations can really be used to educate people, but also to sort of flesh out some possibilities. And I guess I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say about that. And I just feel like NPAs can be part of a solution and a forum for conversation, which needs to happen. It can't all be focused on you guys. It's cruel at this point. It's hard. Thank you.
Yeah, Jonathan.
Yeah, I appreciate, Carol, what you said, and I appreciate Karen as well. And I appreciate the work you've been doing, Zoraya. I really do. But the DVPO issue is very dear to my heart. And I guess when I see the way when looking through the PowerPoints and looking at the way the staffing goes, I see the domestic violence prevention officer as not being lost first, but being lost last. I think that Chief Murad has been working very, very hard to retain that role. So it's not like, you know, it's a role that's getting thrown away to make everybody afraid. He's worked very hard to try to preserve it. And if he doesn't preserve it, it's because that officer needs to cover a shift. And I can't argue with that kind of decision. I don't know the answer to that, but I think that I think the way I've read the files, that number 74 is just very risky for this particular role, in terms of how it happens. And that's really my concern about this, because as it stands, without changing the cap or the floor or the ceiling, it's, you know, it's a decision that's going to be made rather than something. Nobody can provide assurance that such a critical role in our community, and you can correct me because I don't completely understand it, but I think it's a role that transcends race, it transcends class, it even transcends gender. And so it's absolutely critical for our community to have somebody doing that work. That's where I get concerned about the decisions that the city council has made.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. And not to get into a back and forth, but I hear you. I agree. I was really hoping, I mean, the last number that the city council talked about was 79, which I think was, you know, like a compromise in a lot of ways. But I think that's, you know, I think that's a place that some constituents would really like to get to. And I don't think that's off the table. The other part on the rhetoric, I apologize. I clearly spend a lot more time with the mayor than I do with the police chief. And so sometimes things are said that are political that aren't necessarily a plan. And I absorb a lot of that. So if I misspoke on Chief Murad's intentions or behalf, I am sorry. Yeah, and I'll leave it at those two things.
Yeah, Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's important too. I really appreciate, Jonathan, your consistent advocacy on this. And I think this is a completely dynamic and ongoing process. So we need to, I completely agree with you about trying to retain that position. And in fact, I think what we're doing is building up a lot more positions that we do feel will be a lot more responsive to critical needs in the community and more effective at supporting folks than sort of traditional policing, which has been made clear is failing for a lot of folks, including we've had several people call in and share experiences that they've had with domestic violence and the ways in which the current policing system has failed them within that. And so I think we just have to keep leaning in and keep trying to forge this path forward. You know, Monday was a big step, but it's certainly just an ever evolving and continuous effort that we're all engaged in. So we should work together to try to figure out, you know, that aspect as well as all the other intertwined aspects that we're dealing with here. And I think one step that we didn't actually mention as well that we took Monday that was really important is we executed or authorized a contract for a really robust analysis of public safety in Burlington that'll include a large public engagement process and also an evaluation of the department and the community's safety needs. And so when that comes back in April, that'll be another really critical moment, I think, for the city to really have a much more robust set of data and information and community input to take that next step as well. So I'll just say that.
Yeah, go ahead, Zoraya.
Sorry, last thing. I'll switch to something that Carol talked about, which is, yeah, I'm hoping next time around I won't be chairing a joint committee anymore, but I do think that some work around changing the council rules and other things just to give the NPAs more authority and power and find ways to empower them and have more of the decision making. I'm really excited to turn to looking at some of the governance things instead over the next year. And so hopefully that will be something that we can work on.
Carol?
I'm just wondering if, as part of the assessment that's being done, does it make sense? Is it possible for the NPAs to help facilitate some of that information gathering and conversation? I assume that the NPAs are part of that dynamic, but I don't know that, so.
Yes, so there's two different assessments. One of them is more so they're split into two assessments that are led by two different consultants, and I have 2% battery left, so if I die, I'm so sorry. There's the first one, which is just a community facilitation process, and so the first thing we'll talk to is just all of the kind of NGOs and a few different departments that are involved in public safety, and then the second round, we're hoping to have a broader outreach, which I think the NPAs will kind of be the big touch point for that. So that's its own contract, and that contract is then supposed to inform the second contract, which is the Burlington Police Department assessment. So they're supposed to look more at call volume and staffing and how it related to kind of what people want to see and where the gaps are between those two things and how the city should fill them as a whole. So yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Not that assessment, but the one that we already are currently doing.
Okay, thank you.
Any final questions for the counselors? Or any final comments from the counselors as well? Okay, I don't see any, so we can move on to Kathy, who will be presenting on the school budget, I believe, and giving updates.
So, Tom, can you share the presentation I gave you? Is Tom Darren following?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh,
I've got to find it. I don't think I have that email up. Let me go
okay.
find it.
Well, I mean, if it's not there, there hasn't really been any huge changes since last month when Aiden gave you the presentation. It's pretty much that same presentation over again, except for that we have the possibility now, because there's more money coming in through the state, but they haven't given us an exact amount. So we are now at 6.88% is what the budget figure will be on the ballot. Probably by the time people get bills, that will have come through the money from the state, and that will be lower, but we don't have any idea from the state how much is coming. So as a result, it's still at 6.88% increase, which was what you all saw on the presentation last time around with Aiden. And so what the end result will be, I can go through all this, but it's far easier if you're seeing the presentation in front of you. I can give you the ballot language, which is, shall the voters of the school district approve a school board to expend $95,105,000, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for ensuing fiscal year. It is estimated that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in educational spending of $17,069.13% equalized per pupil. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 0.89% higher than spending for current year. And that most of that spending for this year, which essentially comes out to 6.88%, is personnel, things that mostly the school board has no say over one way or the other. It is the money we're getting from the state, and We have only increased 120,000 for the support of multilingual liaison to help families. Multilingual liaisons work only the 9 months of the school year, and we have increased it so that they will work all summer, because students doing summer programs and also preparing to go into school need these liaisons to translate for the families during the summer. And it's mostly about education. It's not that they're doing anything other than that. And also this is the end of our past strategic plan. We are beginning a new strategic plan in the spring. And that is $100,000 in there that we've added to allow for limited implementation of some priority actions identified during the planning process. But those are the only two increases other than personnel increases and literally healthcare and those things. But we have found over $1 million in savings that we have put there. Originally, that tax percentage was supposed to be somewhere around 13%. And we have, through money from COVID and monies that we saved over the year, we have cut it down to the 6.88%. So that pretty much is it. It is the same presentation as Aiden gave you last month. It will only hopefully be less than that by the time you get your tax bills.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions on that? Karen, feel free to go.
Hi, Kathy, thank you for that. With and it's a long shot that the development downtown will be done in time, that there is the TIF financing. But if there is TIF financing, my understanding is that because we're using tax money that would have been going, some of it's being taken from the education fund, is what I understand. And like, yes, a lot, 70% or something, or what?
I don't know the exact percentage, but across the country where these TIF monies have been used, states have banned them or stopped using them because it was the fact that it was taking funds away from the schools. Now I've asked the mayor and I've asked our city councilors a bunch of times that were pushing the TIF. I said to them, why has everyone else? Tell me how this does not hurt schools. And none of them have come back to me with anything telling me or explaining to me how this doesn't hurt schools. So as far as I'm concerned, across the country, all the studies done on TIF have showed that they have hurt schools, that schools have not gotten the amounts of tax dollars they needed in those TIF zones, because we're adding more housing, and then there's not the taxes there to pay for the schooling of the children that live in them. So
right. And so I'm from California, and they have been outlawed there for quite some time, and that's why, but I don't really know how to find out much information about it, except for that you're right, there are a lot of states that have outlawed it. So maybe our legislators, or I don't know. But anyway, I think it's an important thing, because education is constantly, being underfunded, and then, this be interesting. Maybe, if anybody knows about it and can let me know off the meeting, that'd be great. Thank you.
I do know, if you watch House Commerce, then they this is kind of like one of the main focal points that they've been working on. I just know it because like I work with the Chamber of Commerce for an internship, and so I have the privilege of watching all those meetings. So it may be worth reaching out. I know Rep Mulvaney Stanek is on the committee, like Burlington rep, so maybe reaching out to them for more information. But I actually had I don't know if you'll know the answer to it, but when they're talking about TIF funding for this project, did they say like how many years the turnaround would be for the schools to see benefit? I know it's generally like 40 years or like something insane, but do they talk about that in terms of Burlington?
No.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I never got to my questions, I never got any answers. They all kept saying to me, no, it doesn't hurt schools. I said, yes, it does. And please explain to me how it doesn't then. If you think it doesn't hurt schools, then explain to me how it doesn't. And I never from anyone was given the explanation. And I literally have asked at least 5 people, the mayor twice, but he's never been able to explain how it doesn't hurt schools.
Yeah.
So
I think you're talking about the payback time, Hannah. I think it's 20 years or 25 years. So the problem is it's all the people coming up. You know, it's a long time.
Yeah, no, I know in some projects in Vermont, like it could be 40 years before they like schools and like property owners see a turnaround. It's definitely like a long process from what I don't know a ton about it, but from what I could tell, it's very complicated. I'm sorry you haven't gotten any answers about that. Does anyone else have any final questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kathy, this is Tom. I did find that email, and I can show that page unless it's too late.
Well, it's probably too late, but at least if you have them, there's one that I sent you that was just the 1-pager, and the other is the presentation. But it's best probably if anyone would like the information that we send them out the 1-pager. That would probably be the easiest thing. And I'm going to put it on Front Porch Forum tomorrow. So everybody who wants it should actually look on Front Porch Forum, and I'll send it out through that.
Okay, the link that you sent me, I'll add to the minutes.
Oh, okay.
So people will get it that way as well.
Okay. Is this the 1-pager? Because I sent you 2.
Yeah, it's 1-pager. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
But I have a question as well that I just wanted clarification on. The TIF impact to schools, is that because school funding will be cut, or because we'll have more apartments and more kids that will have to find additional funding to educate?
No, if they were paying their normal property taxes back, that would cover them. But in a TIF zone, we have given them they don't pay taxes, the personal people do, but the corporation is given all these oh God, what do you want to call it? Tax write-offs in order to build those streets through, or whatever it is that they're going to do with the TIF money. And that is what is detrimental to the schools, because we are not getting the amount of taxes from those properties for the amount of time that TIF zone is active. And I'm probably not a great one to explain that whole thing, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I hear you. It sounds like that the money we would normally get from those properties during the TIF period, we're not going to get. And so
right. You're not going to get all of it. You will get some of it, but not all of it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going on to candidate presentations. So that's Jack and Kathy. I we're planning on doing that until 8:20. So whoever wants to start, and then I figure we'll format it, just you talk, and then if anyone has any questions, if you're both okay with that, they can just ask. But whoever wants to start off is fine.
Jack, you can start.
Okay. All right, great. Yeah, well, I don't know exactly the format. Are we leaving time for questions, or are we just speaking, Hannah?
Carol, did we, it only says candidate presentation, but I think we should have enough time, but I'm looking to other steering committee members because
I think we were hoping that, Jack, that you could split your time
Great.
between presentation and question and
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah, no, I
Thank
definitely
you.
would prefer to do that and leave time. The TIF, yeah, I don't think anyone can really explain TIF, Kathy, so don't worry about it. I still am struggling to fully understand it, to be honest. And I had a really helpful sit down meeting with the former CAO where we spent like an hour going through the various types of TIF and the different TIF districts and the different ways in which it's used. And it's incredibly complicated. It's also really, particularly, it's hard to explain, even more so than it is to understand, I would say. So, but yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about my candidacy and my campaign. It's a lot different than last time, running unopposed and running for re-election versus being a newcomer and running in a competitive race. But I'm definitely excited and energetic to serve another term. And I've really tried to focus a lot during my time on council on the climate crisis. And obviously I've worked on a lot of other issues pretty intensely, but whenever I can, I try to bring a focus back to that issue because that's the issue that concerns me the most above all. And I feel that we are making progress as a community, which is great. I think we're doing some innovative things, and there's a lot of opportunity in Burlington that doesn't exist in other communities to really play a leadership role on the climate crisis. And so I'm simultaneously, I guess, proud of the work that we've done and that we're doing and optimistic, but also feel like, we do need to be pushing a lot harder in order to truly meet our goals and to really meet what the climate science is telling us that we have to do in terms of quickly decarbonizing and quickly getting off of fossil fuels. So I've focused on, within that, heating and transportation are the two biggest areas in Burlington that are creating emissions. Transportation's number one. I focused on that on a number of different fronts, whether that's these street changes that are controversial, but I think really important. Colchester Avenue, I would say, was pretty dramatically improved in terms of safety, in terms of accessibility for different types of users, and in terms of really starting to shift away from all of our public infrastructure, or not all, most of our public infrastructure and resources going towards the personal automobile. I think, we're starting to shift a little bit away from that, which I think is really critical in terms of transforming our transportation sector. So Colchester Avenue, we made some changes in 2019. We're looking at additional changes that I think would really take that to the next level. Winooski Avenue is a really key corridor from north to south in the city where we've moved some, I think, great changes downtown, and we're looking at the old North End now and moving that forward. But we're trying to create this network so that a lot more people can feel comfortable on bikes. And I've gotten to see cities where that is the case. It really makes a big difference. If you can step the infrastructure up, you truly can have a huge shift in behavior and in how people move around and really reduce the impact on the climate, and also save money for folks and improve safety and reduce fatalities and injuries on the road. So that's been a big focus for me on transportation. as well on transportation, dealing with sort of transportation demand management. So, buildings and employers and basically locations that bring a lot of people to and from that location, they can play an active role in terms of how folks get to and from their location. If they build a massive parking lot and it's free, probably most people will drive to that location. But if they have no parking or they charge a huge amount for parking and they have great bike facilities and, storage for their residents and repair stands, and there's a bus stop right there, they have a car share pod on site, it makes a huge difference. So we've been able to make progress on that front with some completely new requirements for new buildings. So those are a few things on transportation. And then I think I talked a lot earlier about buildings and how we're trying to decarbonize buildings. And later tonight, we'll be talking more about the charter change, which I think would be sort of the single biggest thing we could do to allow the city to play an active role in getting buildings off of fossil fuels in Burlington. So that's a bit about climate and kind of the focus and the work that I've tried to bring, but I want to even double down and lean in, even more on that going forward. And other issues that I focused on has been obviously on policing and racial justice and public safety. That's just been a huge issue that the council has grappled with really heavily these past couple of years. And I've stepped into that work a lot. And as I said earlier, been really grateful to have Zoraya as a real leader on that, to be able to collaborate and work with. And I think we're starting to see some really important progress and change in that area as well. I think on housing, it's been hard we were just talking about it earlier, and I think we do need to have this fuller conversation at the NPA. It's been a bit of a struggle. There's a couple initiatives that I've tried to sort of champion and push on the housing front. And it's been a continuous challenge, I think, for a variety of reasons, but I do think we need to better resource code enforcement, and we need to really take a much harder stand, as I think some of y'all have said, in terms of landlords. Like, I've noticed a lot in a lot of the public processes and meetings, there's definitely sort of, a power dynamic. And I think there's an outsized influence of property owners who make up a pretty small percentage of Burlington residents, but do tend to have an outside size influence in the process, in my experience, versus renters who make up a little bit over 60% of the community. And I think tend to often, not have the same voice or weight in a lot of these issues. So it's a deep challenge. And I do think we need to lean in a lot harder as a city in terms of this. And I really appreciate, the focus and energy that particularly you all and this NPA brings to it. And I think I would really look forward to trying to grapple harder with you all on that and lean into that more, especially coming in, with coming out of this election season and, the beginning of a new mayoral term, no matter who that is that takes office, we all need to push that whichever administration that is, it needs to be different. It needs to be a new tone on the issue of housing and especially rental housing. I think I'm coming up on 5 minutes. So maybe what I'll do at this point is, well, I guess one more thing I'll just mention is ranked choice voting, which is coming up, which Terry Bouricious is here and is going to speak to. But that's an issue that I have worked on a lot. I think Zoraya mentioned sort of these structural reforms to our local democracy, one of them being the NPAs and the role that the NPA can play. I agree with trying to give more voice and more power to the NPAs. There's other structural reforms. I think one of them is around how we do elections in Burlington. And I've worked really hard to advance the issue of ranked choice voting, and I'm excited to see it on the ballot And I feel that this mayoral election is sort of another reminder of how our current system is flawed, because you have 6 or 7 candidates for mayor, but really, I think it's kind of commonly understood that there's really only 2 or 3 of those candidates that has a shot at winning. I think that's the common perception in the community. And so if you support one of these minor candidates in the race, what do you do as a voter? You know, you have to make that decision. Do I vote for who I want, one of these minor candidates, or am I going to vote strategically? And I think we're so used to that calculus that we kind of just take it as normal, but it really doesn't have to be that way. We can have a voting system where you can truly just vote for who you actually want, and you don't have to use these strategies of, well, who's the front runner, and do I need to prevent the worst person by voting for the runner up? All these calculations, it doesn't have to be that way. So that's been an issue I've worked on, and I think there's a lot of other structural issues with our local government that we can improve upon as well. So yeah, I'd love to kind of just open it up and hear people's thoughts and questions. And
Yeah, so I see Tom has their hand raised, so go ahead.
Yeah, Jack, this is Tom. How you talk about housing? Can you define what the housing challenge is, or what things are not working? You said that we need to engage, but you didn't really say, well, this isn't working or that isn't working. What is it that's broke?
Yeah, I think it's multifaceted. I mean, one of the biggest challenges, I think there's broad consensus around the fact that it's a constrained housing market. Just the other night, we were talking about Airbnb regulation, which I've been in a joint committee working on for a really long time. We've had like 12 meetings. We're really kind of struggling to sort out that policy. But part of why it's hard is because this market is so constrained. There's so little vacancy in terms of, well, overall, but specifically within the rental market, there's very little vacancy. So it's an unstable market and an unhealthy market. Erhard Monkey, who's often attends these meetings and had called in last night, was saying that really for kind of a healthy balance of a rental market, you'd want to see, 4 or 5% vacancy. We've kind of inched our way up in Burlington. I think we're getting close to maybe 1.5 or 2%, but that's still it's really far from where we would need to be. And so what happens is I hear these stories all the time, and I, to some extent, lived it myself as a renter, is that the options are so limited, the price is so high, and if you're able to find something, if you want to live in Burlington as a renter, you have to just take what's there. And oftentimes that means either you're paying a whole lot a month for rent and for utilities, and or the quality is really poor of rental housing. So I think there's a real imbalance, especially in the rental market, but really throughout the entire housing market, not just rental market. It's really constrained and therefore really expensive and hard to find quality housing that people can afford to live in, and it's driving people out of our community constantly. So from a high level, I think that's the biggest issue. Then we have these other issues with just sort of property relationships and quality of housing that is very related to that issue, but also requires this additional sort of enforcement piece and the city being more proactive on regulating, rental properties. So it's related, but it's also somewhat distinct.
Thank you. Then we'll go to Karen. I apologize. I know you had your hand raised first, so you can go. And then I believe Angie just raised their hand after Karen.
Thank you. Thank you, Jack. Actually, I really appreciate your little updates or your reports of the council meetings. That's really been a nice addition. We've never had that in the 40 years that however many years we've had Front Porch Forum, certainly not 40. But anyway, I really appreciate that. And I know some of these meetings are long and tiring. And anyway, I appreciate you do that. With the housing, I think, Tom, if you just start walking, I mean, I walk all the time and I just am astounded at the condition of places. And it's really sad to me. And I talk to a lot of students. Places are really dirty. People can't shut their windows. People don't have storm windows. There's just so many places. And I love this idea of cracking down on landlords and getting them to move. And basically on Henry Street, we have done that. We had some really bad players in the rental market, and just the pressure of us calling the landlords got them to leave. They sold, and we have homeowners there now. But we still have, I'd say 20% of the housing is rental on my street, but they're all very responsible landlords. They do not just figure, oh, I live wherever. And, it's really more out of state, out of the city landlords, I feel. But another thing, and I did look into this particular property in Ward 1 that I did complain about. I pay 140% more for my building, and I pay 75% more for my land than this particular property on Pearl Street. So I think we need to, and it isn't on income. I mean, I looked into that because Jonathan asked me that. I'm just talking about square footage. And so I own a duplex on North Willard Street. So I'm comparing my rental property with another rental property. So in a way, I feel like I'm being punished because I do maintain my rental property as well as my own home. I take a lot of pride in it, and my tenants have been there a long time. And I think that's how it should be. I don't think it should be these cash cows that people don't put any money back on their properties. And that's really what's happened in Burlington. And I think Burlington has allowed that to happen. And if we could get some kind of system that we really held people accountable, it's a business, they should be proud and they should be safe. Then maybe we would drive some of these landlords out and we would have homes for our own kids to buy. I think that's the biggest thing. It's really 60% rental seems like a really high percentage to me. But anyway, I know you're going to put a lot of energy in that, but I do appreciate that. And I see that as one of the biggest problems for Burlington. I have 3 adult children and 2 of them have moved. And the other is a renter. It's really hard to buy homes in this place unless you're old like me. And we hardly paid anything for our house on Henry Street. It's embarrassing compared to what they sell for now. But anyway, thank you.
Definitely. And I'm cutting into Kathy's time, so I'll just wrap up at this point. But yeah, no, thank you both for that. And it's not that there's nothing happening. I think this weatherization would actually be really huge on this issue. Requiring landlords to weatherize and meet energy efficiency standards would get at a lot of the problem. In terms of that, and the just cause eviction proposal that's on the ballot, I think is big as well for kind of helping shift this power dynamic and helping, make life a little bit easier and more stable for tenants and renters in the city. But so those are big, but we just have so much further to go and so much harder that we need to push to address this. And I guess I'll just close by saying, first of all, I really appreciate the NPA. And I think especially tonight was just a good reminder of how valuable it is for bringing us together to be able to discuss these issues and feel that sense of community and neighborhood belonging. I can't really imagine kind of what it would be like without the NPA. I think it's just so critical. And thanks to those of you who really keep it running and keep it strong. I think as a counselor, I I have really strong values that I hold, and I really fight hard and push hard for those values. And, you know, folks may or may not agree on many of the issues, but one thing that I really, really try to do is just always be present, always work hard, and always communicate with you all where I stand. Like, I want you to, even if you don't agree, I want you to know exactly where I stand and why I'm doing what I'm doing, and sort of what I'm pushing for. That's the most important thing to me, because we're definitely not always going to agree on these really tough issues. But I think my job is to make sure that you know what I'm all about and how I'm representing you, and that we have an open line of communication always. And so I'll continue to really strive for that.
And I did put Angie in the speaking order, so I just want to make sure if you still had a question, you had the opportunity.
Yes,
that's okay.
I can be very brief because Kathy is my neighbor and I don't want to hold her up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Angie. I didn't mean to cut you out.
That's okay. That's okay. First of all, Jack, I want to second or third or fourth the opinion of many people who have spoken tonight, thanking you for your responsiveness to your constituents, and that you understand that we may not know what is going on if you didn't tell us. There aren't necessarily other resources unless we go to meetings all the time. So I just want to say, I really appreciate that you do that regular reporting. And I also want to say, I think that your writing skills are very good. I really enjoy what it is I read that you have written. I understand a lot more about a subject after I've read what you've had to say about it. But that wasn't my question. That was just a compliment.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And yeah, I don't want to cut your question off. I'm sorry. And I'm sorry, Kathy, too, for holding you up as well.
So I can make this quick, and it's less a question than an expression of frustration about housing in the city. 60% of our housing is for renters. And I don't know what percentage is of students, but there are a lot of students who live in housing, and there are a lot of big landlords who cater to those students and understands that students want to live off campus. I understand that, but a reason they want to live off campus is that campus housing is so expensive. It's so expensive. And so my complaint is basically that I never really hear the city talk about let's work together with the university to solve some of the housing problems that we have. I mean, what can the university do to ease the housing crunch in our city? Is it that they could reduce the price of their housing, create more housing? I don't know what it is, but what I'm finding lacking is a conversation, an ongoing conversation, and an expectation that the university will be part of this community and not hold itself aside. And that's what I feel like happens. And I haven't seen the city push the university in any way for any accountability in that way. So that's what
I completely agree. And we do need to push harder, and it needs to be a full push with the administration and the council in order to be effective with the university. And so again, I think going back to the full housing issue, whatever this next administration is, I want to get in with them right away, and our NPA as well, and just really push, like, this has to be more of a focus from the administration, because I agree with you that I think UVM can and should really do a lot more, and I've encountered a lot of resistance there, and wanna lean into that a lot harder.
Okay, thank you, Jack. And now, Kathy, you can go. Thank you for being patient.
Okay, so don't worry, it didn't bother me that you were taking extra time. I'm Kathy Olwell. I've been this Ward 1 and 8 our East District School Commissioner for the past 4.5 years. And I live in Ward 1, across the street from Angie and Jonathan. And I'm a retired social worker. I worked mostly with youth in this city, both at King Street and at Sarah Holbrook. I started the new North End Youth Center out in the Miller Center and started and ran then the after school program at Hunt and the summer program for all of middle schoolers, both Hunt and Edmonds. And we also brought Winooski middle schoolers into that in the last couple of years that I was there. So on the school board, I am co-chair of the Curriculum and Personnel Committee. And curriculum, I think, has always been kind of the area of the school board work that I really love, because it is for me the raison d'etre that we're there. I mean, if we're not teaching the kids and making sure that they're getting really good curriculum, income and impoverished kids. And I really do feel that we need to make sure that they get good basic education. We can't have kids in 3rd grade not reading at 3rd grade level and then going on. If they haven't read by 3rd grade level, they need intensive intervention. If we make sure that the beginnings, pre-K through 3rd grade, they have gotten good reading, writing, phonetics, so that they have a basis that they work on. So we have asked that they, after looking at the scores that now we've had pre-K come to us and report, and I must say we were very impressed with our pre-K staff and what is taught in our pre-Ks across this district and in many of the high quality childcare programs in the city. But our biggest problem is that there's still a large number of children coming into kindergarten in our public schools that have not been through pre-K or high quality preschool programs. And so they come at a deficit, and that is really a problem. And so it's for us more important that we then look at K through 3 and how those children are being taught to read and do literacy. And those, we're just starting into K through 3 this next few months, as well as looking then also in this summer, spring and into summer and fall at the math curriculum in the district. On personnel, we are looking more into how to hire and keep more people of color in our district. We want our teaching staff to mirror our student body, and we have a long way to go to do that. So there, personnel office has been working hard, taking courses on how to get more people of color into our schools as teachers and what to do then to retain them, because it's not only getting them as teachers, because there's plenty out there, it's just they're not here in Vermont, and we need to find them, attract them, and then do our work to really keep them. And the retention is a problem. So those things are what we're working on personnel. I have also, because this has bothered me for many years, I was on the school board in the 90s, and I am now, back 4.5 years with a 20-year interval there. And 20 years ago, we passed Act 60. And it became it was lauded as this wonderful progressive school education funding bill. But it was very clear to me within a few years of Act 60 going into being that we were getting less money, and we were not, the weights that were being used were not correct for Burlington, for Winooski, and in turn, I was sure for many rural poor areas of the state. So I guess the legislature finally, after many of us constantly harping at them that they had to do something about the weighting, they finally did a study that was done in 2019, and it was done by UVM, Rutgers, and the American Institute of Research. And it was given for the legislature. In that study, they showed that we are woefully underfunding our children living in poverty, our ELL, and children in rural small schools in this state. And so now we are pushing 10 school boards across the state have gotten together to form a coalition to push the legislature by hiring a lobbying group to go in and work with us to push the legislature to deal with this. It came up right before COVID hit, and then this bill, and then it kind of lay dormant for all of that. And now they're talking about a 3-year phase-in of these weights. And that bothers me immensely because our children have been waiting for 20 years to be correctly funded for their education. And we as a district have not been able to afford what we really need to support all of those children. And now the legislature is talking about making us wait 3 years, or their phase-in is 3 years, phase-in, and then, I don't know, one bill is asking that it actually gets sent to the Department of Ed, and they are going to work on that afterwards. But I don't feel that it's correct that our children have waited 20 years and all the poor kids across the state. And here we are now asking them to wait 3 more years while the more, the wealthier school districts can learn to have to pay more on taxes. So they're going to phase it in so it's not such a big problem for them. And our kids get to wait even longer. And what irritates me even more about these bills is that the biggest weight is poverty. And that they want to put in the 3rd year of the waiting. So I will be back with you to get you all, everyone on this call, to please help us by writing to our legislatures and really pushing to enact this immediately, because I don't think that this is something that we can just sit on and let take effect when we are, when they so decide. And I don't know, I'm pretty, as you can tell, hot and bothered about this. I have been for a long time. And now when I see that it's going to go through this legislative, I don't know what I want to call it, but that it goes so slowly and that nothing can be worked on immediately just irritates me all the more, because I then watch and see also how our kids are reading, et cetera. And I know if we had more specialists in there working with them, their reading would be at grade level. So that's it. For right now, those are the things I've been working on. I mean, I think we should all know that educational spending and how we weight, we as a state, and I think this surprised me the most, We sit between Mississippi, who's above us, and Tennessee, who is below us. And we, Vermont, I find that appalling. And I just want to say to all of you, if these weights were put in correctly, Burlington children would get 17% more increase, or a 17% increase in our school allotment per pupil, and Winooski would get 39%. And I find it appalling. I'm sorry, but I do, and I can't help but say this. So it is something we all have to work on, and we all have to push, because we are not going to give our kids equitable education with the weights that we're living with now. So, and I would ask you all for your vote, even though I'm also not having anyone running against me. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I want to be mindful of our time, but I see Tom has their hand raised, so maybe that will be the one question. And then everyone has Jack and Kathy's emails, but I'm sure they would be fine with you following up and asking more questions. So Tom, and then we'll go to Terry for ranked choice voting.
Yeah, hi Kathy. Just a quick question. The legislature is considering changing the homestead tax from being a strict property tax to an income tax. Is that going to help our district, or is that going to hurt?
I mean, I'm not really sure at this moment. That I'm hoping they'll take up this weighting before they ever take up that. I haven't looked into that, I have to say, well enough to know exactly, is it going to help or hurt? But if I remember rightly, the weighting is far more important. This is far more funding we will get for education through putting those correct weights through, and not waiting till they have done the oh God, what do you call it? The property tax thing, because I'm not property tax versus income tax, because I'm not sure what that means for Burlington. And I do know what the weights mean, but sorry, I can't answer it right now.
Oh, that's okay. Thanks.
Okay, great. Now, Terry, thank you for joining us, and thank you to all of our presenters for being patient with the time.
Yeah, I'll make this shorter than I had intended, just to try and help catch us up on the schedule, and I'll leave time for some questions. So I'm here to talk about ranked choice voting. First off, it's sometimes called ranked choice voting, sometimes instant runoff voting. Political scientists call it STV, single transferable vote. The problem that it's intended to address is the issue of, if you have more than two candidates in a race, you can have split majorities, you can have quote unquote spoilers, there's dynamics. With a plurality election, which is what we have in most of the United States and in the Burlington mayor's race. With a plurality election, you can have a candidate that a large majority of voters think is the worst possible candidate being declared the winner with 41% of the vote, even if 59% of the voters think that is the worst candidate possible. That is one of the most undemocratic nature of our voting system. And it's worth noting that, well, most Americans, they're only familiar with one voting system because that's what they've used their whole lives. The United States is an outlier. There are very few countries that use a system like we do. Most countries, for electing a legislative body, they use some sort of proportional representation. Give all the political interests, all the parties and persuasions, a proportionate share of seats. They're electing a single person, like a mayor or governor, they use a majority voting system. Usually, the most common one is a runoff election. Nobody gets more than 50%. They simply have another election. And Burlington has used runoffs. And currently, for the mayor's race, the threshold is if you don't get at least 40% of the vote, then there's a runoff election. So if it's like 32% versus 31% versus 12%, et cetera, you'd have a runoff election. But what ranked choice voting does is it combines a runoff election and a regular election into a single election. That's all it does. It simply says, rather than holding a whole new election, which means that the voters have to turn out twice, it has to cost an extra, the taxpayers extra money for running an additional election, all the candidates have to scurry around and raise money, giving yet another advantage to the candidate who has the quickest access to big money. And most fundamentally, runoff elections typically have much lower voter turnout. There have been many elections in the United States. Some states do use runoff elections regularly. And often in the runoff election, the person who wins gets fewer votes in the runoff election than their opponent got in the first round because the voter participation drops so sharply. And that's also been true in Burlington. We've had runoff elections for city council and other races. And the voter turnout does plummet. So all that ranked choice voting or instant runoff voting does is say to the voter, when you come to vote, give your first preference, your first choice to your favorite candidate. And in case nobody gets a majority and we have to have a runoff, rather than calling you back to the polls, simply right now, put a 2, mark the second choice next to your second preference candidate. And if that person also doesn't make into the runoff, well, that's why we let you rank your third choice and your fourth choice, as many choices as you want, so that your vote will count in the runoff if you care to have it, if you care to participate. Of course, some voters may not rank additional choices. It's the same as staying home at a runoff election, saying, I'm not going to bother to go again. Now, Burlington did use instant runoff voting for a couple of elections back in the early 2000s, 2006, 2009. And it worked very well. We had over 99.9% of the ballots were valid. Voters were not confused at all. We set up stations when voters came to the polls. If they had any questions about the ranked choice ballot, about how to use it, there was a person whose sole task was to help them understand how to work the ballot. By midday, they had been sent home in almost every single ward because nobody had any questions, because the voter education had been adequate and everybody understood how to use the ballot. And in fact, there were more spoiled ballots in the non-IRV race, because if people voted for 2 people in like the city council race, their vote would be thrown out because you can't divide the vote. Whereas in the IRV race for mayor, there were even fewer spoiled ballots than in the city council races. So it worked very well. But why was it repealed in Burlington? There's a lot of arguments for why it was. The campaign against it was initiated by people like Kurt Wright and various Republicans who argued that voting should be made simple, that it was too complicated, and that most of the news media at the time said the reason was because Mayor Bob Kiss was under attack for a financial scandal with the Burlington Telecom. And a lot of people said this is sort of like revenge against Bob Kiss because he had been elected in the last election using instant runoff voting. And so some people argued that the Republicans were using it disingenuously because they didn't want IRV because they didn't think they could win a majority of the vote for the mayor's office. And the best way to get a mayor as a Republican was to reduce the threshold down to 40%, because maybe they could do that. Now, I don't know if that's what their motivation was, but the argument was that voting needed to be simple. Now, as I think Jack mentioned, the fact is that while it's simple to count a plurality election, it's not simple to vote in one, because if there's more than 2 candidates, you have to do the calculus. Let's see, I like this person, but maybe my neighbor says that if I vote for them, I'm actually helping the candidate I like the least. And so there's all that dynamic, which is very complicated, especially if there's not accurate polling to show where the candidates stand and you have to guess. Many people feel like they wasted their vote because they didn't get the chance to indicate who their second choice was. So it's a controversial issue, but it's worth noting another objection to using the ranked choice voting method. There's one fellow out in the New North End, Robert Bristow Johnson, who's got a pet project. He's got a voting system that he has invented. It is a variation on a system called Condorcet voting, that basically you do pairwise comparison of all the candidates and say who would win in a pairwise head-to-head race against all these people. And he has said that ranked choice voting does not necessarily elect that person, and therefore we shouldn't reform the system, even though he acknowledges that our current system is far worse than instant runoff voting. He doesn't think instant runoff voting is good enough, and he has his preferred system. The difficulty is that his Condorcet voting method has never been used by any government election anywhere in the world. There's no voting machine companies that make voting machines that are currently able to accommodate it. Whereas ranked choice voting has been used for over a century by millions and millions of voters all over the world. In Australia, they've been using it since the 1800s. And they use it in the UK for certain elections. In Ireland, it's used universally. So it's got a long track record. It works well. In the United States, San Francisco, Minneapolis, New York City recently adopted. The entire state of Maine uses it, and Portland, Maine, which has been using it for mayor, just recently decided to use it for all of their city elections. Burlington is the outlier. It's like one of the only places that tried it and got rid of it. And quite frankly, from my perspective, it was because it was the only way people could show their disdain for Bob Kiss during the Burlington Telecom financial scandal. So, I mean, I have my opinions, which you may have easily been able to figure out from this. I'm supposed to be offering a neutral perspective, but it's really hard for me to be neutral because I think it is such a superior system. However, it does cost more money because you do have to do an extra layer of tabulation. You have to gather all the information at City Hall. You cannot just take the results from each of the wards and add it together and know who won. You can do it as a hand count. We did do a recount, so it's possible to do it as a hand count, but normally we use a computer. So there are challenges to using it. There's a voter education campaign that is required to get people ready for it. So it's not simple to implement initially, but once you're doing it, Burlington did a very excellent job in 2006 and 2009, and it worked very well. So I would stop there and see if there's questions, I guess, if there's time.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions? Just indicate with the hand raise function. Jack.
Just a very quick clarification too, is that the ballot measure before you is to implement ranked choice voting for specifically city council elections. Just wanted to clarify that.
It's for mayor and city council, isn't it? Or is it only city council?
Only city council. There was an initial proposal that was vetoed by the mayor that included mayoral, school commission, and council. But this proposal that was not vetoed is just for city council elections.
I only read the earlier version, so I wasn't even aware of that.
Okay, and now Dave.
That was my question as well, is what are the positions? And so just city council at this point.
Yeah, this question before you is, do we want to use this system for city council elections? Which, yeah, there was a whole sort of debate and process that led to that point, and that being the question before you. I think it is worth noting that city council races have gone to runoff more than mayoral. That was one of the arguments why to do it this way. But also the other proposal was vetoed. So that's another reason why, this was a different proposal.
I had shared a PDF of the Burlington ballot, ranked choice ballot. I don't know if somebody on this call has that on their computer and can just post it for a moment so people can see the PDF. It's not essential, but while people are asking questions.
Give me 1 second and I can bring it up.
Okay. It's called the Ward 3 actual ballot or something like that. Yeah, and the mayor's race is the one on the left. That in 2006, this ballot, it was only the mayor's race. So this proposal is to say only city council races, but that's what the ranked choice ballot looks like. You indicate fill in the number 1 oval next to your favorite candidate. You have the option of indicating a second, third, and fourth choice in the next columns.
Great. Any final questions? Seeing no hand raised, thank you, Terry, for that. And now we will go on to thermal energy. So Jack, Bill Ward, and Darren are here. So I don't know how you all are planning on speaking to it, but whoever wants to talk first, you all should have the ability to speak and turn on your cameras and share screen.
Great. Well, thanks for giving us the opportunity to speak to it. And thanks for Bill and Darren for coming for a late night meeting, as you all often do. So I think I'll defer to you all, Darren and Bill. Did you want to go first with sort of the informational? I think most of the time I was gonna, as we said, leave to you all. I was just gonna give a quick summary of my perspective on it, but do you all want to lay it out first, or should I kick things off?
Would defer to you, and then we can follow afterwards.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll just tee it up and then let you all explain. And so this is a proposal that was a very much, bipartisan collaboration that led to this ballot measure around regulating thermal energy in buildings in Burlington. It came out of the ordinance committee process, which Zoraya and I are both on the ordinance committee. And the mayor was quoted in 7 days, a 7 days article on this issue today. And I really agree with the mayor in his quote, which is basically the fundamental question that we're asking is, do we want the city to play an active role in decarbonizing buildings? That's really what the question is. It's an authorizing ballot question to give the city more legal authority to do that. And I would argue that that's really critical. If we really want to meet, we've set very strong goals for getting off of fossil fuels by 2030. I would argue that we can't meet those goals without the city playing an active role. And so I'm a strong proponent of this ballot measure and worked hard with a lot of folks to kind of put it together. And I hope that you all will consider supporting it. And Bill and Darren are a really great resource on the details, the specifics, and what this could mean for Burlington. And I very much appreciate that they're willing to volunteer their time tonight. And if you have follow-up questions, I'm sure they'd be happy to, or I'd also be happy to speak more on it.
Thanks, Councilor Hanson. Hi, everybody. I'm Darren Springer, General Manager with Burlington Electric, joined by my colleague, Bill Ward, who's the Director of Permitting and Inspections. And from the Burlington Electric side, we're kind of engaged on this from an energy policy and technical resource standpoint. Bill's department is really regulation and enforcement, and this item, if it was enacted, the regulations that would flow from it would really be managed by Bill and his team. I just wanted to speak a little to the kind of the genesis of it. We had been in 2019, we had issued a net zero energy roadmap, which you can read on our website, burlingtonelectric.com/NZE. And it called for incentives and policies to help us move in the direction of net zero energy, which means not only being 100% renewable for electricity, which we already are, but moving in that direction for not only the thermal heating sector, but also ground transportation as well. And Burlington Electric has launched dozens of initiatives and incentives, including our green stimulus program, to help Burlingtonians access these net zero technologies like heat pumps and electric vehicles, electric bikes, electric buses. But the city council as well had asked us, my department, Bill's department, and the Office of Planning to examine policies really specifically around new buildings, making sure they're compatible with the net zero goals. And this discussion eventually led to a proposal in the fall. I believe you can read it on the mayor's website. It's a press release in the October timeframe that was aiming at having new buildings either heat with renewable resources or have a carbon fee or assessment that would encourage them to become more efficient over time. And the city, in examining that, learned that there was not adequate authority in the city charter for that proposal to move forward as it was written. And that's, I think, where this charter change item comes in. And just a couple things I just want to address, because I've been a part of a few discussions about this. I think there are some misconceptions out there that I want to address. One of which is people talk about that the charter change would require people to, rip out their existing heating system and put in old resistance electric heat. That is factually not true. Nobody wants to go back to the resistance heat that was in buildings in the 70s and 80s in Burlington. My home here in the New North End has the old thermostats that used to work for the old resistance heat, and that was torn out. What we're talking about with renewable heating is modern, efficient heating, like cold climate heat pumps, ground source heat pumps that are being used in schools around the community and also commercial buildings, you know, and other types of renewable resources, renewable fuels that can heat and cool buildings in some cases. So that was one item I just wanted to address. And then the other item is that, you know, in some cases, people have questions about moving towards electric technologies, and is it a good choice? And in Burlington, because we're 100% renewable, it really does maximize the climate benefit of moving towards these, you know, electrification technologies. One example I like to give is if you have an electric vehicle and you charge it with your Burlington Electric electricity, 2/3 of your dollar is going to stay in the Vermont economy. If you went to the gas station and spend $1 on gasoline, only 1/4 is going to stay in the Vermont economy. This is kind of a buy local opportunity as we move towards electric heating and transportation, as well as a climate beneficial opportunity because we're 100% renewable. So I'll turn it to Bill if he has some thoughts on the regulatory side, and then glad to answer questions as well.
Sure. I think since we've had a few of these, Darren, I'm just going to hit some of those highlights that I think you and Councilor Hanson have mentioned, but just so that folks understand, it's a charter change to enact or give us the authority to enact future regulations. So a charter change means that it goes to the state legislature if it's passed by Vermont voters, and then it would go to the governor for a signature. And the charter change is about the authority to enact future regulations, which those future regulations would require an additional vote by Burlington voters. So the other piece that Darren mentioned is that partnership with our department. We are the permitting and inspections department. We are bringing zoning, the trades division, and the code enforcement side of what folks usually knew as the code enforcement department. But we've got an important part of enforcing a lot of regulations already within the city. But as Darren mentioned, that net zero energy roadmap that folks can find on the Burlington Electric website is a great way for folks to see what the city has, both for the goal and the way that we're going to get there, those strategies, if you will. And within those strategies, there are things like the incentives that Darren and his team work on, and the policy side and enforcement, which is the Department of Permitting Inspections. That's exactly what we do. We do regulatory, and we're the gatekeeper or enforcement for non-compliance on a number of issues. Permitting and inspections is already the lead in the regulatory aspects for things like health and environmental matters. And a couple of those examples folks are probably already familiar with are lead abatement. If someone's going to do a project where there's lead abatement, our trades division works with the property owners and the contractors to make sure that they're following those regulations. The same goes for asbestos abatement. There are regulatory requirements in the permitting process for things like that. And on the energy side, we're the regulatory lead for verifying compliance with the residential building energy standards, and the same for those commercial standards. So it's not an unusual task for us to work on something like this. I don't think it would be a big lift for us to do on the permitting and inspection side. We've got great partners in the city with Darren's team. And I think the benefits of being able to reach our goal, this is the charter change that will definitely help us get there.
Does anyone have any questions? Dave, you can go ahead.
Thanks. You mentioned that the impetus behind this was when you were thinking about new policies for new construction. Does this charter change, is it just about new construction, or would this give you regulatory policy about existing buildings as well?
So this is specific. Oh, I didn't mean, go ahead, Councilor Hanson.
So yeah, I can speak to that because I was involved in kind of the political process that led to that. And the original impetus did come from the ordinance committee, and we were looking to regulate new construction. But ultimately, through the process that this policy went through, and I specifically was pushing on this front of, if we're going to go seek a charter change and go through this long process of going to the voters and going to the legislature, let's go for something bigger that can really have a more dramatic impact. And so this charter change is not only around new construction, but it is around existing construction or existing buildings as well, and the ability to regulate existing buildings.
Have you had any discussions about what kind of future changes you possibly would be considering on existing?
We have a bit, yeah. I mean, it's something, not really formally though, because, you know, it's something that we can't really even formally get into unless we actually have that authority. But I think it would be a combination. In the 7 days article that came out today, you know, speaks to some of these potential ideas. And I think ideally it would be a combination of sort of carrot and stick, to similar to weatherization, where there's these major incentives that are available, but how do you actually ensure that people are taking advantage of those incentives and moving forward? There is, Dave, as well, an additional ballot question specific to this item that basically instructs the city council and says, you know, if you get this authority, and it's up to the voters, but if you get this authority, we would like to see you prioritize low and moderate income folks in the transition and ensure that they're receiving the most benefits, as well as BIPOC residents of the city, and kind of ensuring that the benefits of this transition are prioritized there. So that's an additional kind of potential guidance from the voters on how we would do it. But ultimately, it would be a whole nother process if we get the authority of what do we now want to do with that authority.
Thanks.
And I think, you know, I think that's where some of the pushback potentially comes, or the discomfort with this charter change. If you really don't trust the city and you think the city is going to do something harmful with this policy, you might say, well, I don't even want to give them that authority. I guess my response to that would just be, if you look at the track record of the city and what we've done to move away from fossil fuels, and especially Burlington Electric Department, I think it's pretty clear with the track record that we've actually saved folks money through these initiatives, not hurt people economically. And so, so there is a level of trust, but there's a lot of additional process that would have to go into it before the policies would be made. And also, I do think the city has a strong track record.
Okay, now we will go to Linda and then end with Tom. Should be able to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Linda. I just want, so the previous speaker, Dave, asked the question that I wanted to ask, but I'll take it a little bit further. So this applies to residential as well as non-residential property, new residential as well as non-residential property. And I'm just curious whether the thought is that that will incentivize or hinder new residential construction that we need to provide additional housing in Burlington, you know, kind of looping back to earlier conversation this evening.
Yeah, I think Darren and I have been, well, all three of us really have been grappling with, in addition to this charter change, there's immediate regulations that we're considering around new construction. And so that question has come up a lot. But in terms of new construction and creating a new building that is, you know, all electric or mostly electric, we actually haven't gotten that much pushback. And I think the cost comparison of new construction is relatively similar. Maybe Darren or Bill has actual numbers on that, but I actually don't think the upfront cost for the developer is really much different. Otherwise, we probably would have heard about it by now, because we've been debating this for months and months, these new regulations for new construction.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I think obviously when we think about new construction, there's actually a number of buildings already in the city without this, authority in place. But thanks to the energy codes that Bill mentioned earlier, and thanks to incentive programs that we have in place for energy efficiency and for electrification with Burlington Electric, we have rental properties that are primarily heated and cooled with cold climate heat pumps as opposed to fossil fuels all around the city today. We have commercial properties and schools that are heated and cooled with heat pumps. And when you're building new and you have the opportunity to design it cleanly, there's a great opportunity, cost competitive, to install these technologies and save money down the road by not having to do a retrofit. The more challenging piece is how to convert existing properties. We have really strong incentive programs right now to do that. More than 800 Burlington residents have taken advantage of heat pump incentives to install heat pumps in homes around the city. But when we think of new construction, it's a great opportunity to kind of build it right the first time and not have to retrofit down the road. And I think this authority could potentially enhance those opportunities, but we're seeing some of them happening already, even under current policy.
That's great to hear. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and actually one thing just to hammer it home too, the policy we're considering, the ordinance around new construction, actually has a carve out to where the way it's written now, it's still draft, but if you can prove that it's going to cost more over a 20-year time period, you can actually get out. And so I think we're really betting on the fact that it actually is totally cost competitive. But if you can prove that the non-fossil option is going to cost you more over 20 years, you actually don't have to comply.
Okay, and we can finish it off with Tom.
Yeah, Jack, I just wanted some clarification. There's 2 ballot items on this coming up, or did I mishear?
There are, and then there's also these other policies swirling that I'm referencing as well, more immediately. So there's many, and as I said up front at the meeting, there's a lot of building related policies in the mix, but there are 2 ballot items. One is this charter change that we're focusing on. The other is an advisory question to voters that would give some guidance to the city. If the charter change passes, we want to see you prioritize low and moderate income and BIPOC residents. That's a ballot advisory question to sort of give some potential guidance if we get this authority.
Okay, and
that's number 7, and the charter, that's question 7, and the charter change is question 3.
Okay, and then I think I know where to find the charter change questions in the city website. These other questions, like these advisory questions, is there a place I can look to get the wording on that?
Yeah, the ballot, now that ballots are sent out, they should be posted. Darren or Bill, do you know if they're posted yet? The ballots?
I believe there are ballots for each ward that are posted on the city's website. I believe under the clerk treasurer's office of elections, but I've seen the sample ballots are posted on the website.
I'll post the link. I just found it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Oh, just one last comment. At my age, if it takes 20 years for payback, I'll be long dead.
So it's not. I have to respond to that. So
I just wanted to throw that out, Jack. I'm kidding.
Yeah. Well, no, it's the cost to the developer over a 20-year cycle. Yeah, I mean, I guess I get your point. But they finance these projects out to where, so if it's a 20-year cost, they're financing that out, spreading it over the 20 years anyways. So the cost in the first year. You know what I mean? So it shouldn't be that lag time, right?
I meant for retrofitting existing housing.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, no, the 20-year thing I was talking about was for new construction. And so that shouldn't be the case. But yeah, existing is more of a challenge because it's not always going to be economical depending on the lifespan of your existing system. You've already invested in an existing system and you've got 10 more years on it. Well, then switching right now probably doesn't make sense, but I don't think many of us would try to push a policy that would really punish people economically in that way, to where if you just bought a brand new fossil fuel system, are we going to force you? No, we'll probably, and from my perspective, we go after the older systems. They're getting ready to replace them anyways. Okay, now you make the switch. So yeah, I think it's a point well taken, is like, we have to think about how we're moving people off and to make sure that we're not hurting people economically.
If I can just, one quick thing on that exact point. If folks look at their Burlington Electric bill this month, there's an insert about our heat pump incentives, and you can get up to 75% off the cost of a heat pump installation, so that we're providing those incentives up front to try to make it as cost effective as possible for folks who are interested in retrofitting. And the great thing about the heat pumps is not only they provide heat efficiently in the wintertime, but for folks who are looking for cooling as well, which increasingly, as the climate is warming, we do have more folks who are looking to have cooling. These are way more efficient than using a window air conditioner, for example, and can save quite a bit of money in the summertime compared to some of those other cooling options. So increasingly, technology is becoming better, more efficient, and our incentives are helping, hopefully, to make it more affordable as well.
And we don't have a chat function. I just got your email, Jack, but I'll make sure the sample ballot link that you sent me gets put in the minutes. So any of the links from tonight or presentations will be in the minutes of the meeting. So it may be easier for you to go there to find that information than anywhere else on the city website. But thank you all so much for tonight. I think it was a really interesting meeting. And again, just to reiterate what everyone was saying at the beginning of the meeting, if there are any questions about voting or like where to find things on the website, I'm sure you can reach out to like any of the steering committee members. You can reach out to me. I'll give you like a nonpartisan link. But I know voting can be really challenging and confusing, especially now. So feel free to reach out. But thank you all so much for sticking with us tonight.
Thanks, Ann.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Good night.